awesome. It says good to go. Folks, if you can hear us, can you please put up a hi or anything on the chat? Yes, we have some reactions coming in. Anything on the chat? Say it if you can hear us. Okay, awesome. Hey, Mayam. Okay, great. Let's begin the session because we're already 5 minutes into it. Thank you, folks. Thank you for coming on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Okay, thank you for coming on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Means a lot. We will first talk a bit about the community and then introduction to the speaker and today's session. Uh, this is Unconventional Geeks. I'm trying to build this platform for bringing in all the unconventionals who have been taking a path which is not defined, which doesn't have a playbook, and they're still doing pretty well in their life to put up what they've learned from their experiences. I have my partner in crime, Siddharth, who's currently working with Amplitude and has been helping me out here building this platform for you guys. Coming on to today's session, an interesting one. Why did we do this? Because me and Siddharth, we literally wanted to learn about AR, VR, the AR, VR space, and whatever products are being built. Cutting this short, introducing today's speaker, Sai Krishna from Scapic. I'm pretty sure that most of you folks who are interested in the AR, VR space would know him for sure. So a bit about him is this, that he's been trying to build and scale Scapic from the past 4 years, and I last came across this platform. I was exploring AR VR 2 years back, and I literally could not find any other platform out there. So Sai is himself someone who's pretty unconventional with his journey because he did his engineering in telecommunication engineering. I can see him doing a internship in IIM Lucknow, which was in marketing. And interestingly, he went ahead to do his master's in entrepreneurship from the Stanford University. That's again a very unconventional journey, which definitely I'll be asking more questions around, if not AR VR. But let's hear from Sai about his journey and how he's been building products around AR and VR. Over to you, Sai. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Utkarsh. Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. As Utkarsh mentioned, it means much to sort of allocate 8 p.m. on a Wednesday evening in order to listen about nerdy rants about virtual and augmented reality. So thank you. I've always been an accidental entrepreneur through my whole journey. So more often than not, it was me existing in a bubble and not being too happy with it. Now, before I get into Scapic in itself, a quick one on that is my name is Sai, and I've sort of been at the crossroads of where technology as well as how deep tech could be applied to reasonably useful and fungible business use cases is, and AR and VR being my most uh, longest time sprint that I've been spending on in terms of trying to crack what could be a technology that's always had a false positive, which is VR and AR has existed for decades, if not multiples of decades, and how we could sort of bring it to life as we go forward over the next 2, 3, X number of years. My journey started all the way back as an engineering undergrad. I hope, much like me, a number of you were disgruntled about how the 4 years went. I certainly was. And it was during that time that I started building things on the sides in order to moonlight on projects that kept me hooked or kept me interested on what I could do. Since then, I've been involved in plays in the edtech space, the AI space, and then right after, during my small stint at GSB, at the Graduate School of Business, is where I used to sneak into the CS department to see what are they building, right? Like, because it is the fabled Stanford CS. So it was at that moment that some of the things that I saw drew me really close to the world of spatial computing, which is really about where VR and AR really falls in at. But that's enough about me. Why don't I move forward and share some of the things that I think are pretty exciting as a time, a technology, and as product folks we could possibly be thinking about with AR and VR, especially as of today, during the pandemic and possibly right after. So on that, let me go ahead and say share my screen to get this started with. Just confirming if my screen's visible with you all. And while at it, I think before we even dive to the deep end of things, right, I made a couple of notes for myself in terms of how I think this session could be useful. The first is no jargon, right? We're not here discussing very specific things on the computer vision or the XR spectrum, which is going to be super nerdy and very little to do with core product or use cases per se. So I'd rather stick to the practicality as well as a current day's sort of assessment of where these technologies are and some punt on where they're moving to next. The second part is also highly interactive, right? I'm sure all of you across listening to this are building products, applications, businesses, services, your own startups in multitudes of different spaces. Now, given that there isn't a straitjacketed way of saying one size fits all, as compared to looking at these from a use case first perspective on where this could make sense for some of the things that you're chasing. So I'd love to keep this interactive, and while we're at it, would sort of be damn cool to have a bunch of questions thrown out so that we all could have a reasonable discussion through this. Because as much as Utkarsh and Siddharth are trying to learn about the space, I'm also trying to learn on what you think of the space. Now, when we get started with VR, AR, MR, XR, it's a lot of jargon, right? It's what do these things even mean, right? Like it's a bit of a difficult time wrapping our heads around what specifically are we looking at with these technologies and where could they be useful, especially in B2B use cases and scenarios at. So given that, I think it's really important for us to take a step back and differentiate out on what are we really talking about when we say virtual reality, or we mention augmented reality, or we even look at spatial computing, mixed reality as such, as independent spaces, and how we could be looking at these spectrums as one continuous line as compared to different buckets of technology themselves. So why don't I get started with a quick primer on what could be this type of a idealistic world that you might see, right? Like all of this is your stock imagery. Like this is Getty Images, this is Microsoft on its HoloLens webpage. We're not here to discuss that. What we are here to discuss about is what's the specific things that our businesses could possibly adapt from these technologies as of today that could be brought to life. So on that, let me get started with, say, VR in this case, right? Like where virtual reality started. And for all practical reckoning, about 8 to 9 years ago, with the launch of a startup back then in Kickstarter called Oculus. Out of nowhere, a 19-year-old kid comes in and says, hey, VR is finally practical again, because smartphone displays had gotten good enough that they could be repurposed for low latency virtual reality use cases when plugged into a PC. Now, this really blew out, leading to Facebook buying Oculus for close to about $2.5 billion. Since then, it's been super interesting to see how the world of VR has sort of evolved out, right? Like devices have become the most important part of the VR continuum. And some of the most recent devices that are present right now happen to be devices such as the Oculus Quest, the Oculus Rift. Multitudes of Windows manufacturers have their own lines of devices. HTC has practically become a VR company, so on and so forth. But what VR really is you wear a headset and you're transported to a completely virtual environment, right? Now, what does that mean is typically you would find use cases like this where you could possibly be playing, say, a bunch of games or gaming-centric use cases that could be brought to life. Now, let me sort of try to see if this video is going to play through because there is very little fun otherwise. Right? So with VR, you're really looking at plugging into an ecosystem with a headset in order to access applications, games, media and entertainment experiences, so on and so forth. Recently, the kind of visual quality that VR has upgraded itself to is incredible. It's still a game, but this one's called Half-Life Alyx. And if you notice, the reflections, the graphical fidelity of what you're seeing is pretty much as good as it gets on any AAA game type. Now, this wasn't possible even 2 to 3 years ago. If you notice that the water bottle there is having a significant amount of graphical work going on, right? So these are really incredible advancements in the field of how these are really incredible in terms of how VR is using PC-based graphics in order to make itself better and better year on year. And that has massive business use cases. So inside business applications, what you'd be able to quickly realize is across virtual presence, training and simulations, Something that has taken, say, a slow moving oil and gas company possibly millions of dollars to build as a simulator could now be all done inside a virtual environment. Now, these are the places where we see business use cases really coming to life, and some of these very specific enterprises starting to deploy VR in a practical day to day sort of ability as such. You're still not using it 8, 9 hours through a whole day, and you're not going to be doing that for a considerable period of time. But for specific use cases in your business across medical, enterprise, as well as training or standard operating procedure driven use cases in spaces like aviation, it becomes very practical for you to look at VR as an option as compared to simulators or physical setups that have typically taken a ton of time and money to sort of get there. But there is a big caveat and a big problem with virtual reality just yet. Now, even when discussing about VR and AR during a pandemic, it's not like I could have invited you to a VR conference, right? And there are plenty of those styles of applications which are already there. Think of it like a Zoom or a WebEx that would exist inside a virtual environment and works great. Facebook, in fact, has its own application called Horizon that's sort of built only for this type of a social collaborative movement. The problem is none of us own headsets, right? Like we don't have the hardware right now in order to be using. And that's a big bummer because without the hardware present, any use case that you build on top of VR for a consumer space is always going to be a lot more difficult for you to exploit or use. And what this means is while VR was heavily anticipated by 2020 in order to completely take off and dominate the consumer mindset, it's not quite happened just yet. But what I can say is if we look at it in as a hype cycle, we're probably at the best part of the hype cycle right now. Over the last year or year and a half, we've gone through a bit of a nuclear winter. But right now, we understand where VR could be useful, where not, and what business applications would make practical sense. Back in the day, we threw a lot in the wall. If a few of you remember this being strewn around, thrown into a newspaper as a supplement, this was a project called Google Cardboard that came with a ton of fanfare and hype, where Google said, you don't need to spend $800 on a VR headset and $1,600 on a PC. You could do all of this with your smartphone and with a $2 cardboard headset like this to bring it to life. So VR continues to be at this spectrum where we're throwing a lot of things to the wall in order to ensure and check out what really sticks to both the business market and the consumer market. We're very close to finding some very important answers, especially in the B2B side as we move forward. And the good part about this is the size of these headsets is continuously getting better. These are ones that were present in this year's CES, even though it didn't fully occur, but it was supposed to be exhibited out there. And what you notice is devices have gone from being the size of your entire face to very thick glasses. We're still not there. In my opinion, this would take about 1 or 2 more hardware generations before we get VR or AR devices that look really impressive for prolonged use. But the velocity with which this innovation is happening at is leaving us with a lot to take home. The second part, now that we've discussed VR, is coming to AR or augmented reality. Now, with VR, one of the biggest problems was I needed that headset. Now, AR takes a slightly different approach and says the best headset or the best access device is the one you have right in your pockets, your smartphone. Now, a company like Apple has been the true champion when it comes to augmented reality on mobile devices just yet. What this means is you're able to flip up your iPad, your iPhone, or your Android device, and you're able to bring to life a layer of data or a layer of information between you and the real world. So the camera becomes a great viewfinder for augmented reality style experiences. So how does that really work out? Is a cool example that you might have tried out is when I went to like Apple Park, there's a bunch of iPads that are strewn around what would seem like a simple looking surface with the Apple Park as a miniature that's sort of present right there. You pick up the iPad and you point it towards that, and it entirely pops to life as a layer of information on top of this white miniature that you would find of the park in itself. It's a great use case in terms of how you could use AR to explain a lot on why the building was designed in a certain way, or just providing a layer of detail that you never could have done with just a physical mount or just a 2D display like an LCD screen that might have been there just yet. The technology is also improving really quickly. This year, Apple launched something called a LiDAR scanner or a time of flight sensor right inside the iPad. Now, what that means is your devices have the same capability as what used to be present on like a 1 lakh, 2 lakh type laser scanner that used to be there 5, 6 years ago. This is a big step forward because what your smartphone and your tablets are now able to do is recreate your world in this sort of a dot matrix or this sort of a point cloud display that they're able to augment additional information on. What this means is these augmented reality experiences are going to start getting incredibly real in terms of how they look, feel, and function. If you notice here, all these overlaid graphics on top of, say, an existing video that you're recording is very similar to what you would notice with, say, a VFX studio, right? 15, 18, 20 years ago, when you're making a great movie or a great snippet, you would go to a VFX studio, ask them to make motion capture, make face tracking, or this type of localization where you can add additional elements on top of your video as such. Now, think of all the cool things that you can do in the world of VFX and bring it right into your smartphone. That's really what AR enables you to do as of today. So it sort of opens up the boundaries in terms of what are some of the things that you can bring to life. But your smartphone is still reasonably clunky, right? Like if you're going to hold up your smartphone like this and sort of bring about a bunch of experiences to life all the time, you're not going to be like this for like hours and hours together, right? It's a very cumbersome experience. So the very obvious next direction is to look at wearables as a sector that you might want to enter. What this means is companies are already spending a lot of time, effort, and money building these types of wearables right here. The one on screen here is a very hyped startup called Magic Leap that has over $2.5 billion in capital from the likes of Andreessen Horowitz, Google, so on and so forth. And the goal is simple, right? What if your glasses or your smart glasses are able to scan the room in front of you? And once they scan the room, very similar to the LiDAR technology that you just saw, start adding elements to it. Now, this really opens up some possibilities. So think of the world of media, entertainment, advertising, commerce. A lot of things move this direction. So you can now walk around the room and sort of start interacting with all of these elements that are present right there to bring to life. It's pretty cool, but the problem is that these devices are not quite ready just yet. Just like virtual reality, augmented reality devices are deeply difficult to build. And what this means is we're not at a point where you or I could be walking around, say, the streets wearing one of these devices and making practical use of it just yet. But again, over the last 4 years of me sort of looking at the space, we have come leaps and bounds in terms of how some of these spaces or these pieces of technology could be used. That's all cool. That's all good and nice to know. But honestly, all of us want to understand, hey, what's in it for me, right? Like, where could I be involved in this whole space, and how do I bring this to life? Now, on that, the first piece to understand is while AR and VR might seem like these Pandora's box style technologies that you don't really know whether there are enough people using it, a typical chicken and egg problem, the numbers are actually pretty impressive, right? Like, because we have smartphones and we keep using applications like Snap, Instagram, Messenger, or even the Chinese counterparts like WeChat with a bunch of augmented reality experiences inside them, a lot of people are already attuned to using things like face filters, basic AR experiences, so on and so forth. Which means that you're very likely to have used an AR experience, such as Pokemon Go or a face filter, so on and so forth. Or you would have seen an ad which uses AR in a sense, or even better, shopped inside augmented reality, where you're using it as a better way to visualize how the chair would look inside your home or the car would be in a paint of orange. What this means is all companies are, I would say, clamoring together to see what parts of the AR or the VR stack make sense for today's world. So on that, I would largely look at it as if you're in the product space, you could view the worlds of VR and AR on 3 tiers: marketing, commerce, and productivity. So I'll sort of break down each one of these pieces in order to chat about this a little further on where it could make sense. The first one is, where do people even access this information? I don't want to be building yet another app. I don't want to get into the dirty business of working with a game engine like Unity and Unreal in order to keep things, in order to make myself useful in the VR or the AR application that I'm building, so on and so forth. Now, if that is the case, we then need to look at it from the standpoint of, where can you access this info? The good part is that it's already available right inside the search engine, other Google applications like Google Maps and YouTube from day one. What this means is, if you're a creator, if your web page has anything to do with good visualization of products, experiences, the chances of you exploiting AR or 3D in order to do something meaningful for your business is pretty high. So it's almost like AR is a feature, right? AR is not the app, AR is not the destination, it's not the end goal, as much as it is about that one feature that really helps elevate some of these experiences for you at any point of time. Now, this doesn't stop with search or Google's products. Think of social media, right? Every one of Facebook's properties, Facebook, the core app, Messenger, Instagram, use augmented reality in a certain way of function. Snap recently had its developer conference as well, and it was pretty amazing in terms of how they are at their core an AR platform or a camera that is brought to life. The experience that you see here is taken through Snapchat, where an actual physical monument is now using computer vision, and you're able to identify what the monument is, make it move around or make it seem like it's moving around, and use AI to fill the other parts where typically the Statue of Liberty's hand should be, so on and so forth. It's a ton of cool tech that comes together to give you this ridiculously cool looking experience at any point of time. The good part is, companies like Snap and Instagram are already figuring the underlying bells and whistles. It's a technology called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, required in order to build these experiences. So you don't need to break your head or really worry about, is this important for me to build from day one? Rather, think of it no different from, say, Android Studio or an existing, even no-code visual editor like a Bubble, where you'll be able to use drag and drop functionality and bring a lot of these experiences to life. So the next time you're in the D2C space, your brand's launching something, or you want to get the word out a lot better than just a carousel, what you could look at for is, across these properties like Instagram, YouTube, Snap, these are very underexploited features, which means that if you're in the growth side, you could be possibly looking at this as ways or techniques in order to get your audience hooked onto the brand that you're building. People have already done this, right? Which is, in the world of advertising, you've some of the most premier brands out there, such as Warby Parker, Burberry, recently Lamborghini as well, have all started using AR as a natural part of the checkout process or a natural part of the brand discovery process, right? So what this means is, consumers are starting to get a flavor or a taste for AR more often than not. So what remains differentiating now will hopefully become table stakes as we move forward. But that doesn't mean everything makes sense inside this, right? Like, I don't need to see a bag of groceries in augmented reality, in 3D or in VR, so on and so forth. What I do want to see is shoes, bags, glasses, virtual try-ons, shades of lip gloss. There are very, very specific categories of services that might make sense for better visualization. So on that brings the next part, which is commerce, right? Like, commerce is probably the one space that has had a natural fit for technologies like augmented reality from day one. Case in point, Amazon, IKEA, a lot of companies that have spent millions or hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make it happen. In fact, companies like Apple, if you open up Apple's webpage for any product right now, you'll be able to see that a big part of that page is actually dedicated to helping you see a product in AR better. So why does that matter? Is honestly that when I was looking at the Mac Pro, not to purchase because it's $50,000 and impractical, but just to see the size, fit, finish, dimensions, the way it looks, and more importantly, the way it looks on my desk, are actually very subjective questions, right? Like, you can make as many cool renders as you want or these stylized shots as you want for your product. But if I don't like the way it fits in my home, I'm going to return it. Now, this then becomes a great way for you to have some top line and bottom line impact, where you're able to, in a way, keep your consumers hooked or engaged on your PDP a lot more. And on top of that, you're also able to help them transact a little more confident because they know how this thing looks and feels. At the last part, if it's a confident guy buying your product, it might be a guy who's going to be a lot more comfortable not returning the product because people are a little more aware of what they're signing up for. In fact, don't take my word for it, right? Like the good part is your smartphone, your web browser, as well as everything in your device today is already primed and ready for building some or using AR functionality right now. You can go ahead and pick up the smartphone, scan this QR here, and you'll be able to bring this experience to life right away. Now, that means that it's trivially simple, or it has become trivially simple, where I'm not asking you to download an app. I'm not asking you to install something from like a widget or anything like that on your desktop. It just works on any Chrome browser or any browser across a reasonably modern smartphone, and it's good to go. What this means is the entry barrier, which used to be 2 years ago a 500 MB app or a Pokemon Go style game that you had to download, is now a natural part of the checkout process. I've quickly built even a intercom style widget where you're able to see this inside a chat widget and sort of bring it to life as such. Now, outside that, there are a bunch of other use cases for virtual reality in the world of productivity. The most obvious one is with respect to planning, training, and operational procedures. What you are able to do now is create these sort of large 3D files and 3D assets, no different from building a game, but this time building it for your business use case as such. So as you're going forward with that, you can start now looking at VR as a way of showing someone something before it's actually done, right? Like architecture, interior design, home decor, planning. All of these are very natural fits when it comes to virtual reality. In fact, during the pandemic is probably where some of those usages have spiked, especially in the B2B space just yet. On the other side, you'd also be looking at the world of productivity with respect to collaboration. So these could be niched out use cases such as airlines, because of very strict rules inside the airport, now looking at AR in order to have wayfinding, navigation, and indoor mapping to be present. And on the other side, using presence or collaboration as the core layer, where two people get to collaborate on the same file, bring it to life, something like what NASA would be doing with Microsoft, the HoloLens, and sort of work around the same 3D file to make that workflow a lot better and a lot easier. Now, these productivity use cases are a little more at the deep end of things. And unlike the smartphone and the QR that I asked you to scan, this could mean that you're sort of investing a tangible amount of effort, resources, and sort of time in terms of trying to build some of these pieces out. So before you go there, I would again pause, take a couple of steps back. Know the land, right? Be doubly sure that you want to be building something on VR, AR, or wearables or mixed reality as such to bring it to life. Each one of these has its own advantages. In VR, you're able to completely shut off the real world and transport someone to a virtual world, which is incredible for gaming, presence, teleportation, things that you want to do inside that whole new space. Now, with augmented reality, it's probably the most accessible, right? Your smartphone, your web browser, or an app is good to go. And for the first time, use cases above Pokemon Go is sort of even coming to life. And with respect to wearables, they're probably the most promising part of how digital content could interact with your smartphones. This also means that the way you code, develop some of these applications become important, right? So with VR, you're going to be using a gaming engine like Unity, Unreal in order to be bringing it to life. With AR and with mixed reality, while a gaming engine is great, there are slightly easier ways to also bring it to life, say as drag and drop tools, as well as specific SDKs that are a little easier than a full-blown game engine to possibly be using at any point of time. But it's very easy to drink the Kool-Aid, right? Like the first thing that is to be acknowledged is VR and AR have probably had the most amount of hype in as a deep tech space, probably not living up to as much of the hype that exists. A lot of that can be attributed to one phrase: is it needed for my business? The reason I say that is it is very difficult to reverse engineer the problem from all of the solution that I just mentioned. unless there is a very obvious need or craving from your customers, either behaviorally or some way for you to quantify, don't get to the building part just yet. Right? The code is the easy bit, in all honesty, with these technologies, even though it's deep tech. The real tough nut to crack is where could these use cases be naturally fit in as a part of the customer journey. So far, it seems that the AR especially has the most accessibility, the easiest starting point, and a fairly natural way to fit in to a larger workflow or a larger customer journey like commerce, advertising, social media, the camera, so on and so forth. Now, with VR, it's a little more demanding, but a lot more useful when it comes to specific use cases like training someone for something, getting someone up to speed with a massive procedure, or reducing costs for your business by not setting up a simulator for $10 million as compared to making a great VR experience that's doing the same thing. So it is not a magic bullet, and it is not meant for every application or every product out there. So again, before you guys start building it, question yourself one more time. Is it really needed? Have you done a considerable amount of research with your customers before you sort of get started with the building part? Now, the double emphasis comes with half battle scars as well as half a lot of things that we've observed in the space with respect to the ability for the customer to use your tool or use your experience is only as much as do I really need it, right? Like watching Netflix inside virtual reality is great, but if the device in itself is making me uncomfortable after 15 minutes, would I necessarily be doing that? And that's really where I think for you, your use case, the industry you operate in, and the business that you're sort of helping build out, there might be 4 layers of filters that you might want to put through in terms of understanding why this would make sense for you. And the last is, do not look for vanity as much as utility. VR and AR are probably the easiest ways in order to make something look cool, right? An augmented reality experience for a grocery app. Sure, but why? Right? Like the moment we start skinning the cat when it comes to, is the core reason that we're doing this for making something look better or making something work better? I think some of these answers would become really simple. What that also means is this isn't magic dust, right? Like you can't sprinkle it on an application and expect it to sort of have a radically different effect. What this is a very specific, almost surgical tool where you would deploy it for niche use cases with a lot of customer ROI. Because if you get it right, the ability for it to have a good impact is massive. Case in point, the way you use face filters. Snap is a $30 billion company built exactly around this concept. Instagram has an entire division of more than 400 people working on the augmented reality filters and the core platform to bring it to life. So again, the utility there is, as much as it's about looking cool or looking funky, is about the fact that you're spending so much more time recording those videos, sharing it with people. The camera becomes an area of self-expression. Now, what are the equivalents for that in the world of commerce, advertising, your business? Those are answers that I think are a little more nuanced, but we are closer than ever to finding some of these answers because we've now started to treat it as a core piece of technology as compared to an experimental piece of technology. And that's largely what I would want to leave you guys with, right? Which is, it is actually an incredible time to be involved in the space of VR and AR. And the reason I say that is 4 years ago, this was an industry that barely existed, right? Like the number of people involved in it could be put into an Excel sheet. But now we've sort of come to a phase where we're not just using it, but either as passive users across multiple channels, as well as actively developing certain use cases around them. I think the world's sort of come to at least the acceptance that in things like a post-pandemic world, these technologies become super useful. So there's going to be a lot of a catalyzing or an accelerating effect for adopting as well as building things like VR and AR as we move forward. Now that's not just from me, right? Like just to wrap it off on the rumor mill, there's a lot on the on the boiler that things are going to be looking up as we sort of move over the next 12 to 24 months. Specifically, companies like an Apple have sort of bet the entire house on the fact that their next device of which is going to be a game changer after the iPhone or the Apple Watch for what it was is wearables, right? Like you continue to look at companies like Apple that look at a sector like wearables either as AirPods, smartwatches, then you suddenly look at it as, hey, it's a problem to solve where it's a $50 billion industry with glasses, right? Like Warby Parker, Luxottica. It's no longer just a big clunky headset that you're wearing, as compared to sleek wearables that do a little lesser but are a lot more functional for everyday use. And this time around, you won't look like a glass hole while wearing it, like Google Glass was, largely because the tech has gotten better, the utility has gotten way more functional, the costs have come down significantly, and privacy concerns are always going to be there, but there are at least sensible companies like Apple who could possibly be answering some of those questions better. What that means is big tech, such as the fan companies, continue to hire product people and engineers in AR and VR at a really fast pace, right? Like over the last year, they have been some of the scarcest folks to sort of be a part of these companies at. And what that means is if you want to be involved in the space and sort of dabble around with it, you're probably in very few who sort of have made that jump into a space that's reasonably growing fast, but only expected to grow faster from here. So it's pretty exciting to be involved. Look at it as we all like these holograms, we all like these stock images of how something can look at. But while having said that, we're not there yet, right? Like we're not walking around our houses manipulating 3D objects like this, but we're getting there. The first signs of doing that is right there in your pocket with your smartphone. So get started there, right? Experiment, dabble around with what makes sense for what you're building. And from there, you would immediately find a lot more utility with wearables. And that way, you're sort of having stepping stones of varying degrees of complexity and success as you're able to drive this forward for both the products that you're building, as well as how cool you think the technology is in the first place. But it is a great time to be alive, specifically to be involved in this space. That's about it from my side.
Perfect. Thank you for this. Sai. This was really amazing. Great insights, folks. You can follow Sai on his Twitter. Uh, the ID is here. You can also mail him if you have any queries or any suggestions related to the field. But yeah, we are not done yet because there are a lot of interesting questions in the questions tab. Sai, if you could help answer all of them, because it ranges really from not only the business side, the business implication, but also how products are built and how you release them to the world. So leaving it up to you. There's some 10 odd questions. uh, let's start with Siddharth's. I mean, Siddharth, he's from Unconventional Geeks. But yeah, the first question is: with COVID changing the world, do you foresee companies utilizing VR to engage with customers? For example, Cisco already launched one of their products via VR experience. Uh, yeah.
Right. So I think before, say, even a COVID, what was happening was while we were always having a conversation as to what would the future of work be, would that involve VR and AR a lot more? There wasn't a pinching necessity to do so, right? Which is everybody was around the same conference table more often than not to discuss something of mission critical importance. But then during the pandemic, that quickly evaporated as being an option. What that meant was when before this VR used to always have a fringe seat on the table saying it's good to have, we can sort of explore that as a eventuality. Now eventuality has become urgency. Has VR cracked it in terms of being exactly the thing we need in order to move forward in the digital workspace? Not yet. But is there a requirement for something like VR to be a part of that narrative even more so ever than before? Absolutely. So companies like Cisco, Facebook especially, have been always looking at VR as a workspace as compared to just a hardware platform, right? Like if the device gets good enough, all screens in front of us could be substituted by some of these head-mounted devices, HMDs as they call it as. Now that's a function of display density, ergonomics, as well as how these devices might look. But that's a solvable problem if you notice, right? Like 10 years ago, if someone told you that your smartphone's going to have a screen that's better than your TV, you're going to be laughing at it, right? Like the first iPhone versus the 11th are very different. And that's the same thing with this space as well.
Right. Great. I hope that answers Siddharth's question, because this brings us to the second question of Siddharth, which is, what are some of the top industries that you think AR/VR will do wonders in? I think three of them you definitely have answered in your slides. Interesting to know if you have some other industries where you see these implications doing some wonders.
Sure thing. Outside those three, which is media and entertainment, commerce, as well as productivity, I'll try to sort of throw in a couple more, which have seen significant amounts of interest. The first one happens to be something that's called LBE, or location-based entertainment. Now, what this is companies like Disney have started to take everything cool about Disneyland or like Disney World and sort of bring it into like a small room where you can play with your friends a bunch of cool experiences. So imagine you walk to a mall and there is this cyberpunk setup that's present there, which is like an entire floor, not too big, not too small, but just the right size for you and your bunch of 8 people to be involved, where you wear a headset and all the physical things around you are mapped to the VR environment. So when you play laser tag, imagine as if you're playing it on the surface of Mars, right, with someone else, right? And the actual surface of the place where you're playing it is mapped to VR, which means if you bump into a wall, you're actually bumping into the wall both in real life and in VR. That's a ridiculously good experience, right? Like, so companies like Andreessen Horowitz are betting heavy on this in the venture capital space by investing more than $100 million into companies like Sandbox VR, Chinese company that sort of builds these specific location-based gaming experiences for, say, Iron Man, Wolverine, and an X-Men, bunch of other things like that, right? So think of these sort of I can play the character style experiences to be possible inside a mall and another bunch of places like that.
Great. Uh, Now this brings me to the. I mean, while you were going through the slides, you definitely answered about the adaptability of these devices, because 15 minutes into a movie or 15 minutes watching Netflix, you could just feel uh, the pain or probably the irritation in using these devices. But what time do you? I mean, do you have a timeline, or would you predict that, okay, by this year we would have something which will become mainstream in the OTT side, like OTT releasing their own virtual or augmented reality space products?
Gotcha. So interestingly, the big players in the OTT space already have VR product, which is Netflix, Hulu, Disney. The problem is nobody uses them, right? So I think uh, it's VR suffers this problem called, which I would like to call as death by a thousand shrugs, right? Like it exists, but how do I care, right? Like how do you stop that? And in order to stop that, I think we need to stop viewing VR as an alternate world, like which is it's either real world or VR, as compared to VR is a gateway drug, right? Like which is you wear it when you want to, you get rid of it as soon as you're done, right? Like it's almost like Google search. Google is incentivized to throw you out of the search engine as quick as possible, right? Like you come here, you search for what you want, you're off. Similar to VR, which is it it's not going to serve this every day or this 8 hours a day sort of functionality anytime in the future just yet. What it would serve great for is you need to achieve something specific. You're collaborating on a 3D design at in the office, or you want to access a quick meeting where someone else has something to show you, or you want to watch or play a quick game for like 5 to 15 minutes. Put on the device, snap out, snap back in as soon as you're done, right? So we're always, at least for the next two device iterations, which would be about another 2.5 3 years, what you would see is phases of VR usage as compared to whole time blocks of VR usage just yet, and that would still remain at the sub 20-minute mark. But you would notice that developers and as people who are building these use cases start to use that to their advantage as compared to the other way around.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. But this brings me to the more than a question. This more of like looks like a validation by Arun, which says one use case where I see a practical and a monetizable application of AR VR is for home interior services like LiveSpace and HomeLane. So just to continue with this, what are your thoughts around this? And not only it should not, the question limits to LiveSpace or HomeLane, but how do you think it getting implemented in all the e-com spaces as well, wherein fashion is definitely an industry. People would want to at least see how it looks, how it feels, before making a purchase, and how do you really think Myntra would be able to reduce down on their return percentage if something like an AR VR is mainstream in their business or product?
Interesting one here. So I would look at it as you brought up a few spaces yourself, right?
Yeah,
AEC architecture on one side, home decor on the other, real
yeah,
estate on the other. But take a step back and look at it as more of a jobs to be done side, right? Which is, why do I care? You care because you want to understand size, fit, finish, the end product a little better, right? Like it's almost like looking at a room in a 2D image versus going to that hotel and realizing this room looks nothing like it.
true.
That reality expectation mismatch always existed in e-commerce, right? There used to be multiple memes on it, right? What I ordered online versus what turns up in my door.
Yes, yes,
Which means that VR and AR is actually the afterthought. The actual problem was, damn, I don't know what I'm buying, right? Like it's a problem. And this could be for a house because I'm leaving it to the carpenter, I'm leaving it to the interior designer to go nuts. Or this could be for a chair, which I genuinely won't know if the gaming chair would be fitting into my into my room or not, or would it look decent if it fits into my room. I think that as the consumer job continues to be haunting them, right? That's why returns are high. How am I supposed to know if brown shade 12 on a stock model in Mintra is going to be the exact shade of lipstick that would look good on someone if they buy it?
true.
That looks good on the model, but I have no clue if it looks good on me. I won't even know if your cap looks good on me right now, right? Like, so there are very fundamental questions that we could try answering as consumer behavior as compared to, hey, is AR, VR making sense? Does the consumer behavior exist there? Right now, 100%. So that's where I think the technology becomes a lot more useful. I like both the question as well as you mentioned. So how do companies view this is whether you're selling a house, a chair, or lipstick, you suddenly start looking at this as a gateway drug, right? Which is as I'm buying this product, what if I'm able to tap a button, open the camera, drop it right there, take a picture, send that picture to your friends, get approval that, oh damn, this looks good, and then
Right.
end up buying, right? You've always wanted to do that, right? Like, but you waited for the t-shirt to come home, you wore the t-shirt, snapped a picture in front of the mirror, then showed it to someone.
Yes.
So I think that whole process has been cut short. So your behavior remains consistent, which is always a good thing. The technology that tries addressing the behavior has sort of started to get a little better, which is using computer vision here.
Great. Yes, this kind of let's move to Ranju's question, which is pretty interesting about the space itself. He says we all know about what happened to Google Lens and the concerns about Snap Lens. The world is getting more conscious about privacy. Where do you think AR wearables will go considering such limitations? Interesting one, because yes, I mean a lot of my friends, they've been quite often ordering the webcam stoppers. I mean they'll just try to hide the webcams their phones itself. So where is this going? What do you think about it?
For sure. Yeah. Interestingly, this problem is probably going to be going to an exponential raise as we look at the next few years. Like what is happening today is the webcam is a feed of video that's possibly going right now. We already have concerns as to whether our Alexa speakers are listening to us when we are at home, etc. Right? Like so, there is very visible concerns. But take that concern and dial it to 11. What do I mean by that? Is if you're using an iPad Pro that launched this year, or the new iPhone that would be launched, or say the Samsung Galaxy S20, all of these come with the same lidar time of flight sensors that I just said. So what they do is every time you launch the camera or you launch an AR experience, they shoot like the way Face ID shoots infrared to map your face and make a 3D version of it. Imagine the same thing to be happening on the rear camera. It shoots infrared in order to capture a 3D version of your whole space at any point of time, which means that companies are starting to collect a 3D map, just like the way Google Maps exists as a 2D map of every physical point, both in your home as well as in the real world. So these are called point clouds. And what a point cloud allows you to do is once you have point cloud data, you could use that for autonomous driving. Cars know how to better navigate a city because you now have a 3D version of the city as compared to depending on a LiDAR. You could use drones to map deliveries better because you suddenly see that point cloud becomes infrastructure, right? I could sell that point cloud and do anything on top of it.
True.
Now, That then becomes the next rat race. And that rat race is not going to be achieved without some serious questions on privacy. Because you're not just uploading data, you're uploading a 3D rendition of your real world here. I don't want a 3D version of my bedroom to exist with some company whose data privacy rules don't make sense, right? I don't want an ad for a pillow or a Casper mattress to turn up inside my phone or in my wearable device as soon as I walk to that geo-fenced area. That's scary. Now,
Right.
how do we prevent that is no real easy answers just yet. There are some larger specifications, open source consortiums like the Kronos Group that sort of come up with specs on how an acceptable VR or AR API should work. But these are early days, right? I don't think we are treading these waters with the amount of caution that they might deserve later. So it's almost very slow and then very fast, right? So it's going to have that downhill effect there.
Right. Combining a couple of questions here, Sai, because people are asking examples of the implementation of this technology in other spaces. So I have Deepak, who has asked if you have any example of implementation of this tech in the edtech world, and I have Ganesh, who has asked the same question around tourism or hotel industry. So combining the questions, yes, a few examples, or how do you see this going in these industries?
Absolutely. Um, in edtech, I think very recently what's been happening is a big push on treating 3D and AR as a big part of the learning process. What you would notice now is if you just pick up your smartphone, say Google up for a basic educational concept, let's say, because we've all gone through biology, mitochondria, right? The moment you Google that up, the first result you would see there on the Google search engine on your smartphone, not on the desktop, is a button that says view the mitochondria in augmented reality. That you tap on that, it opens your camera and drops it right there, right? So think of edtech companies using the same functionality. As the next time I'm learning about an internal combustion engine, I don't want to view this sliced view of it in an NCERT textbook, which we all grew up reading in order to bring to life. I don't understand that. Think of organic chemistry as bonds and how atoms react with each other, nightmares that used to give me, right? Like, so K-12 learning on one side has so much to benefit because of using better visualization tools on 3D and AR from day one, right? We've already seen companies like a bunch, right? Like as of today, you would find that a bunch of these learning modules across on Wonderscope, which is an app that collaborates with the Disney in order to bring to life a bunch of cool educational experiences. A bunch that Apple is making at any point of time. Google with opening up the search engine for educational terms to have 3D files and augmented reality files to be a part of it. AR is not the destination as much as a step in between in that whole edtech learning path in order to bring these things to life. So the next time you're reading up of a concept, I think it becomes really cool in order to view something in AR in 3D, toy around with it, learn something better, get out, move further.
Right.
This side with edtech is interestingly more to do with live streaming, right? Like as of today, the one thing that we do is we're all on these Zoom style 2D calls where my slides are separate from my webcam feed. So there's been a lot of experimentation in AR there, where what if I'm able to, just as the way a face filter is able to just map out your face and just extract that feature, what if I have slides on one side and I'm able to then superimpose myself there in order to make it look like I'm a news broadcaster? Like you would have seen this inside some of these really cool ESPN football style broadcasting
Yes.
pieces where you have $100,000 camera rig that sort of slowly walks around to bring these mixed reality experiences to life. Now, all of that is possible, right, with your smartphone or your iPad right now, right? So the next time I'm delivering a pitch or I'm sending a video of a product, what if I can bring the product to life around me as compared to me being a Loom recording on the bottom left of a page and then a screen share on the center of it altogether? You can start blending the digital with the real a lot easier now. And that's really, again, where I think tutor based edtech might move forward, right? If I'm teaching a concept, I don't want to be on one side of the screen and my slides to be on the other. Rather, I would want to be the screen, right? So that I can walk around, pull concepts together, teach it. You've seen the Weather Channel and all trying to do a bunch of this, right? Now think of that made a lot cheaper, faster move to the education space.
Right. I mean, interestingly, we a couple of friends we were discussing about this world wherein all the history teachers would, take their students back to the reality of how things were happening in the past, how these battles were fought and what exactly happened in the past. So yeah, that'll be really really cool to see, to be alive to see that. What impact to So let's come to a question which is now focused on product management, which is by Prem. Would you suggest an experienced product owner to try and become a specialist PM for the AR VR products, or just be a generalist and rather expert at learning new techniques, considering everything like job opportunities, market demand, and everything? Yeah. Fair question. Uh, do you have to be an expert in the AR VR space to become a PM here?
Very interesting here. I would rather look at it as breadth versus depth. And I think if you are uninitiated in the space, that's almost a superpower for you to exploit and use, which means you don't come with a tremendous amount of biases while you're getting started. Now, while that might seem like a disadvantage at start, trust me that if you're a PM on that bucket, you could actually flip that on its head and start conducting user research, user testing, and user reviews with a lens that nobody else could bring in. A specialist at any point of time, more often than not, tries to. It's almost a falling in love with the idea problem that they face, right? Which is we start viewing every problem in the world as a VR AR problem to solve, which it isn't, right? So you would rather start looking at it as someone from the outside, a lot more first principles in terms of why does this make sense at all? And you could then start using that as the lens with which you vet a lot of the features, a lot of the user clarity, and the demand generation that you're trying to do in terms of validation before you build. And what that could do is potentially save you, your team, and your company a ton of pain and a ton of trauma that you go through while building the product, right? So if any industry requires more user validation testing as well as building lean and sort of building with continuous feedback loops, AR and VR is probably -5 there, right? Like you have to do that even before you think of the product. The product comes last. Even though it's a tough space to build, it's the easiest part of the building phase. Validate, validate, validate. And if you're not involved with the space before, use that to your advantage so that you're able to build a sense of empathy towards what the consumer wants versus what the engineer wants.
Makes sense. So in a practical sense, no one should be if you should not be worried about not knowing the space much better. Probably jump into it, try and learn more about the space, and you'll be able to do it. So moving on to a controversial question by Divyanshu. It's like companies like Magic Leap, Bose seem to be giving up on the XR front. What does it mean for the space? How far off do you think the tech is being from becoming mainstream?
For sure, yeah. If there is one industry that has had more false positives in terms of false starts, VR and AR is probably right up that list, right? Like 1994, the Virtual Boy releases, we say, hey, it's VR's time. 2005, computer vision starts to get good enough where we can start doing some of these pieces again. We say, hey, VR is here. Startups like Blippar make it big with $1 billion in terms of market cap, and for advertising, branding, marketing, we again throw our hands up. Oculus gets bought, we throw our hands up. We've seen it, right? So what has happened is we've gone through a huge peak of inflated expectations when it comes to consumer grade VR and AR, right? So if you look at Magic Leap, if you look at Bose, and if you look at a bunch of other folks in the graveyard, you would notice that a lot of them had very significant consumer ambitions, right? Bose wanted to make audio-based augmented reality a possibility for every spectacle manufacturer and Bose frames that were out there. Any guy who bought a Bose speaker was ideally the customer for the Bose frames as well, an average consumer. Magic Leap raised $2 billion purely for the breakout that I could make an elephant appear off the palm of your hands or a whale appear in your basketball court when you're wearing these devices, etc. The consumer space is a lot more finicky. Google Lens, Magic Leap, we've seen it, right? We've seen a number of hardware attempts at this. Because as of today, devices aren't small enough, fast enough, cheap enough, or cool enough for you to wear just yet. So you don't expect wearable-based success to happen right now, right? If there is any company that you might still want to pin hopes on, it's probably Cupertino, Apple, etc. But that's rumors, right? Like you don't want to build a company expecting some other company to launch something which let alone can be as good as the iPhone, so on and so forth. So consumer grade wearables are a while away, right? When I say a while away, we're talking about a 2.5 years, 3.5 year time gestation period at bare minimum. And anytime when I have told a timeline, add 2 years to it because I'm the optimist there, right? So what that means is consumer grade VR and AR, especially with wearables, is going to be a little while away. But what would occur is your smartphones, your tablets are already great access mediums, and you're doing it even without you knowing. A portrait mode photograph that you take actually uses a lot of the foundational technologies that face tracking uses, face filters uses. It's all starting to mingle together. It's all in this larger part of computational photography and computational slam. And what that means is today it's a great looking portrait photo. Tomorrow it's a great looking face filter. Day after it is Snapchat doing that for the gateway of India where like a flag goes through it. What next? Right? Like it quickly starts going up the ladder. And those use cases are a lot more practical, useful, and easy to build and experiment on as of today because I'm not waiting for you to buy hardware and I'm not waiting for great hardware to arrive in the first place for that to become practical just yet.
Great. So, moving on to a slightly, I think the answer to this would be lengthier for sure, because Prabhat asks, would it would be great if you could walk us through the steps taken to implement a reality in your work, like starting from the ideation to design to how the release happens. So, if briefly, if you could walk us through the journey or the cycle.
Absolutely. Um, Going from idea to an actual product is probably a little longer than most other spaces, especially in VR and AR. But broadly, we could break down the steps into a, a few cycles, right? The first one is you've got an idea, great. Just question yourself on where the idea stems from. Did you get the idea because you thought it was cool, or because you faced a problem, or because someone told you they faced a problem? These are wildly different parts of actually even coming to the ideation phase. If you thought it was cool, quickly validate whether it's only you who thinks it's cool or everybody else around you thinks it's incredible, right? The second part is I read this with interestingly the guys at Basecamp had written a book called Shape Up, right? And it talks about how you break work down into cycles and go forward. A big part of Shape Up says breadboard your concepts even before you get building, right? So breadboarding largely means what are some of the large blocks which make up or constitute this idea? Do I need hardware? Yes, no. Is it AR, VR, or something in between? Yes, no. Is it consumer facing, business facing? Yes, no. Sort of have these rubrics in place in order to filter your idea really quickly so that you get some sense of who your ICP is. Because in VR and AR, it's very easy to say it's for everyone, right? Like if I'm building a Zoom alternative for you in virtual reality, who is the ICP? It's you, it's me, it's someone learning a class, someone doing a conference call. The ICPs tend to be very broad, very large because these use cases at times can be very generic, right? So how do I get to a very narrow cohort of users who might not be big at all, but who can at least swear by the product in the early days for it to get started with? Because a quick example for this would be an application called Tilt Brush that exists in virtual reality, which is almost like a painting canvas that's brought to life in VR. So imagine you can paint these incredible looking 3D scenes inside virtual reality that are brought to life. They went after a very specific bunch of people who are ridiculously good illustrators who can pick up skills like these very quickly. Small cohort, but possibly the champions you need in order to build meaningful applications on top of. So get that in order twice. After that, go to the breadboarding of your concept, which is draw out some of these functional blocks. Use something like Framer, where it becomes really simple for you to not spend too much time in the Unity, the Unreal, the game engines, but rather more on the standpoint of actually getting that hollow prototype built out. Go back to your customers right away, right? Like test. Every line of code that you write should have possibly gone through at least like a score of 8 on 10 that your customers want that feature, right? Like now this is going back to your superhuman finding product market fit. Go to your customers, ask them, in the absence of this product, would you give a damn, right? Like now it's easy for an email service. I mean, great work there, but it's still relatively straightforward for an email service because all of us in this session would possibly be using one. The answer quickly becomes a lot more dicey if I ask that for virtual reality services for a home interior designer to be showing better things to their clients. Right? Like
True.
you quickly sort of narrow your cohort now. So just make sure that even if it's a narrow cohort, people are swearing by what you're actually trying to build. Framer is actually a great starting point for this because they sort of have building blocks for this from day one. If you're in the commerce space, jump onto Scapig. We make it just as simple as well. But the core goal is use a prototyping tool, right? Like just get started there, show it to your customers. You would then immediately know whether this is a good to have, a must have, or damn, like I would die without having this just yet.
Great. That's the way of building products. Uh, so I think RJ from Alpha Tech. One interesting question is that what impact can AR have on e-commerce? How do you quantify it? I think both of these questions have fairly being answered during the discussion. And but the last bit of thing is that this one's the interesting part that I've heard that there is a company that's making a 3D map of the entire world. Can you share your opinion on the feasibility of this? Yes. So let's answer the second part, Sai, because I think the first two parts we've already covered
For sure,
on
yeah.
the.
There are some interesting data to throw as well on the commerce side, which I'll come to. But on the second part, which is building the 3D map, a crowdsourced 3D map of the entire world, that's already started, right? Like as I said, every time you open your smartphone now, there is a good chance that there is LiDAR data that's being used and sent back, right? Like it's an opt-in program right now, but you might notice that the times won't be long whether it becomes opt-out, right? Like it'll be opt-in by default.
Yep.
What that means is this is a company called 6D.ai, where they used to specifically be built. Every time you launch their application and do anything on top of it, consistently records your feed and sends it to a cloud service. So machine learning gets better and better and better of the more data it collects. It's a never-ending thirst for more mapped spatial data that can be brought to life. It's called the AR cloud, as in the AR terminology. And what it is almost a digital twin of everything in the real world that you're able to use as a point cloud that you're able to bring to life. So people know that they can't do this by brute force. So now you start crowdsourcing a lot of this data through. Now, a company like Facebook would be doing this every time you open the camera inside Facebook. A company like Apple would be doing this once you opt in and you're okay giving that kind of data. There are varying degrees of this. But what that means is it becomes practical for you to actually have a billion people scanning things around them when they are doing something like catching a photo, recording a video. It is silently recording all of this in the background and sending that back. And now you suddenly start having this point cloud of the entire world. So the next time around, when you place something in augmented reality, if you guys have tried it, today in your smartphone, it says, wait, scan the surface in front of you to place something. Right? There is this whole phase called localization that is required before you place something through. It says, hey, we're waiting to find a surface out so that I can place an object there, so on and so forth. Like, that whole problem is solved, right? Like you would then it opens your camera, it has a digital replica of the world right there, drops it plonk on the table, and it's brought to life. Privacy concerns, sure, but it is deeply impactful if we have a scaled up version of the real world as a point cloud. And companies like 6D.ai recently got bought by Google as well. Means that you're already looking at this from a how can Google Maps not just be a 2D map but a 3D map of the entire world style view as life moves forward.
Great. Bunch of questions again. One question that let's pick up on the product management side of things is a question by Divyanshu, which he asked that what does your tech stack at Scapik look like?
Oh, interesting.
If you would like to share.
What we build here at Scapik is a no-code tool that makes it simple for an e-commerce player to drag and drop their entire commerce library and make them AR compatible. We go after the world of commerce specifically because that's where we think the ROI is the highest. Specifically, companies like Shopify have already started rolling out a tremendous number of features in order to make AR a part of the whole Shopify experience. Early data from Shopify seems to point that you almost spend double the time watching these 3D and AR experiences inside the Shopify store, and conversions are up by about anywhere between 25% to 45% at bare minimum. These are eye-popping numbers, right? I'm sure it'll come to a little bit more of a normalization later on once the novelty of the technology starts wearing out a little bit more. But these are still considerably large numbers, which means that a store which was selling, say, $100,000 of merchandise is suddenly making 25% more, 45% more. That's money in the pocket that everybody wants. So for the first time, AR and VR not just have hey, it's cool sort of a part of the narrative, but it makes me money as a part of the narrative. And so that's really where we think the world of commerce is reasonably well primed in order to start using features like 3D, VR, virtual try-ons, so on and so forth. Even this, we also didn't want to make it like you have to download yet another app, or every store has its individual app to get started, because that defeats the purpose, right? All of this has to be seamless on the web in order to bring it to life. So at Scapic, we not just built an AR stack, a no-code tool around the AR stack, but we also made it compatible right inside a web browser wherever you're shopping or wherever you are. That means that we had to build an API from scratch or contribute to an API from scratch called WebXR. The typical stack that we have is, of course, built around React, Babylon.js, Three.js, and WebGL. But very specifically, if you're looking for outside the ordinary, we would be using something called WebXR, which is a device API that has very recently launched on Chrome, which makes it possible for you to open up AR experiences right inside the web browser. So if you notice, an app always used to have better graphical capabilities than the web browser, because the browser never had these types of GPU calls, or it could not access low-level APIs before this, right? So a browser can only do so much, while an app would always be better in terms of the way it processes graphics. That line is starting to get a lot more blurry these days, which means that if you have an augmented reality experience running at 60 frames a second inside an app, it's going to literally be the same 60 frames a second inside your browser, because there is no difference between the browser calls and the app calls. And that is now made possible through WebXR as an API. So if you're looking for building on top of WebXR as a spec, we're one of the more active contributors to this spec. It's a Chromium spec that every major Chrome-based browser is starting to build out. And that makes it trivially simple for you to get started with building some of these cool use cases on top of.
Awesome. I think it was quite a thing for you to reveal what tech stack Scapic is actually built. But one interesting question by Vinay, and I'm not sure if it's actually happening, is that are you also building remote surgery kind of experience? Are you building is something that he has asked, but yes or no, you can go ahead with the yes or no to the question. But yeah, what are your views around this space or probably this process?
Sure thing. So I would broadly categorize that into a field called virtual collaboration or virtual presence, which is I want to be doing precision level inputs and outputs when I'm not there physically. So this could be for surgical use cases, or even think of aerospace. We work with some incredible folks at Airbus in order to bring this to life, right? Which is they've got a big office here at Whitefield, Bangalore, but all of their airplanes are docked right now in Toulouse, France, right? And if the airplane goes kaput, I can't really fly there right now to take a look at what's going on. But how do I now open up the fuselage, take a look at what's going wrong there, and actually make a meaningful change to it? Now that is where we're sort of enabling a whole degree of virtual collaboration to happen in the same tech stack that we employ for commerce. What that means is you would be able to look at the aircraft either with a wearable or with a smartphone, pick it up. It's almost like TeamViewer in augmented reality, right? I can now tell you what to do by doodling around your space and sort of adding arrows, adding contextual cards, PDFs. And now you don't need to go through a 1,500-page manual for you to find the right step. But all of the steps are automatically surfaced, and you are sort of a call away, where the call's not happening much like this, but you're sort of having your camera feed open, and I can start doodling on top of that to tell you exactly what to do. Now it's starting in the B2B space for aerospace, etc. But the day is not far when, hopefully not far when, say, your Wi-Fi router goes bonkers, right? And your customer care guy says, restart it, right? Like that's the traditional solution one. But if that does not work, and if you want to actually troubleshoot what's going on there, what if you're able to open up the camera feed, immediately show that guy what's going on, he's able to say what you need to be doing in order to set this right, and you're good to go, right? So those types of light touch experiences are sort of what we sort of tend to work on. The same underlying concepts is where remote surgeries or surgical precision level tools as well as use cases come to life at, except you require a lot more intent in order to make that very specific, very precise, which is in the space of, say, setting right your router. When you draw a circle, that circle can be off by 5 millimeters. Nobody cares. That's not okay if you're in an operation theater, right? So it's the same construct, but a lot more deliberate with how precise it should be. So that means you have a 5G femto that is making the latency really low. A lot more care in order to make these use cases work well.
Great. One of the interesting questions by Harsha Srivatsa from Heterogeneous is that can you talk about industrial applications for AR VR in like factories? I wish I could answer this because I definitely I mean being very close to, I mean being observing Scapic closely, I kind of know they have solved a very big problem for one of the industrial sector. But yeah, let's hear it out from Sai.
Thanks, sir. If there is one space that has the most amount of displacement through a technology like AR and VR, it's probably the industrial side. Starting from planning, procedural, training, and diagnostic layers of how this industry operates, there is a lot that one could bring to the table. So start with planning, right? Like the next time an oil refinery is about to set base, a lot of what is going on there could be first experimented on in VR, and that could then be used as the basis on top of which a lot of the scenarios are brought to life. You already do this significantly on top of existing platforms like, say, Azure IoT, right? You have a digital twin platform that asks you to have all the input parameters of your existing factory that's brought in. You're able to create this digital twin of your factory and run simulations and scenarios. Now, all of that is data dependent. Now, VR makes that visual dependent, right? You create this actual physical rendition of your space, and you're able to plan, simulate, as well as run so many scenarios in order to optimize the layout. This could be for a factory. This could be for the next Walmart store so that I understand the flow of crowds a lot better. And this could be for, say, the next oil refinery in terms of how something could be set up so that the flow of fire emergency exit procedures are going to be the most tactically useful if something tends to go wrong. After that, you would come to training, diagnostics, and operational procedures, which is even something as basic as what do I do on day one when I come to that factory tends to be a big hit and miss when it comes to onboarding someone as of today. Factories tend to spend a significant amount of time, money, as well as sunk cost when it comes to just having whole teams ready to onboard teams who are then freshers who are joining in 6 months, 7 months, right? Because these are mission critical frontline tasks. What if a lot of that is actually brought to the virtual tier, right? The next time I want to operate a rig or operate machinery that's like $50 million and I need to know exactly what's where, I can't be waiting for that on a YouTube video or on a manual, but rather I want the real thing or as close as the real thing as possible. But the company does not want to spend $12 million, which it does today on these simulators, but still make you come as close as possible from your own living room if so. That's again where virtual reality offers a lot of ways in order to tackle some of these problems. The last is more to do with internal business collaboration or the flow of data, right? So if I'm working in the automobile space, at times you do these clay models or these clay rendition of cars as they go through the final production phases. You would be surprised on the amount of effort it takes to go from an artist and their 3D version to a clay model to the first prototypes and then subsequently the last ones, as teams tend to be global, teams tend to be spread out, and there is always going to be that one engineer who has issues with the design guy, who has issues with the collaborator, who has issues with top management. Suddenly you have a way in order for you to have a fabric of collaboration across these guys in every step of the process, right from the initial design phase to the practical clay model to a wind tunnel to launching the car out as a configurator for your customers. So you now go from silos or buckets of operational procedures to one seamless spectrum, and all of which could be done inside a virtual continuum. And that is pretty exciting, especially in the industrial, the automotive, as well as the oil and gas sort of fields as such.
Great. I think one question, which it's like a tactical one, which Harish from Bond Digital asks is, what do you want to say about Facebook's Horizon? And same as Oasis in Ready Player One. What are your thoughts around that?
We've always wanted this metaverse here. Call it what you want, right? The Oasis, the metaverse, the virtual world. There is a specific amount of science fiction driving the real world that has always happened, right? Like we never got hoverboards, we never got a lot of things in science fiction, but science fiction has tended to drive a lot of aspiration when it comes to what's next in technology. A big part of that is this concept of a digital world that's as good, if not better, than the real one. And that's really where these companies are betting some of their houses on, right? The whole concept of social interaction is taken to a whole new level. It's on steroids when you think of it in VR, right? Because if you have this whole virtual presence and how it's brought to life, it's quite meaningful if the whole experience is well put together. Having said that, we've always thought that the virtual world has to be a direct replication of the real world, skeuomorphism, right? If a tree looks real in my backyard, the tree has to look absolutely real inside VR. The thing about skeuomorphism is even in your smartphones, you used to do a lot of that, right? Like the old versions of iOS used to use a lot of skeuomorphic elements, like a notepad used to appear exactly like a yellow notepad in order to make you feel familiar, so on and so forth. But the sooner you realize that I don't need to be skeuomorphic, I don't need to replicate the real world inside VR, the more powerful these use cases start to become. So Horizon is for the first time where companies realize I don't need to mimic the real world as compared to build this whole parallel with a whole new set of rules inside VR. So everything appears, I wouldn't say cartoonish, but definitely a little more opinionated, where it's not trying to mimic the real world. And on top of that, has its own set of rules and boundary conditions, where everything that you think of as a disadvantage of VR, they are trying to use it as a feature, right? Like take every bug and sort of make it appear like a feature, like typical Intel playbook, I guess. So on that, what tends to happen now is Horizon is probably the fifth or the sixth attempt by Facebook in getting this right. If they don't get Horizon right, they will try half a dozen times more. Right? I don't think Horizon is treated as the holy grail as much as it is how much did I learn from Facebook Spaces? How much did I learn from Oculus venues? How much did I learn from Second Life? How much did I learn from say a bunch of things that came before that too? And then possibly use all of those learnings to come here. So it's almost like repeatedly using iterative cycles, not inside the same product, but across multiple products to possibly bring us here. So Facebook again would bet its house on Horizon, but given that device penetration is not high, Horizon might not be the answer that it wants or at the critical mass that it wants it to be, but it'll just buckle up, launch again till it gets it right? Because that's really what VR and AR has been, right? A set of consistent iterations where 8 out of 10 things will fail, and you're hoping that 8 out of 10 things will fail because that's where expectations start off from. But the two that work, you now start pouring rocket fuel into to really drive it to the moon.
Makes sense. Sai, so we are 1.5 hours, almost 1.5 hours into the event. 8 more minutes to go. I have 6 more questions in front of me, 5 more exactly. Would you want to take them up or on a follow up? Up to you.
Be happy to. Why don't we answer, say, 1 or 2 more so that we don't bore everybody too much, and then from there we could.
So I'll take the leverage of being the host on choosing the questions. We'll take 2 more questions from the list. I think let's for so Madhulika asks, when it comes to virtual reality try-ons, especially for outfit size and fit matters, as we face customers of varying shapes and sizes, how do you handle a challenge like this? Like when customers try the outfits with different size and fits, how do you handle this challenge? Right. This is.
So this has been a fairly difficult problem to solve, especially in CD. What you can't anticipate is what is the existing ground truth, which is, am I wearing a hoodie? Am I wearing a tight-fitting T-shirt? How do I know whether, or how does the AI know whether what you're wearing right now is sort of measured around certain parametric variables? The answer is you don't. Right? So as of today, the way that we approach this in 2 stages, especially when it comes to virtual try-ons. When I say virtual try-ons, I'm not referring to lip gloss, sunglasses, etc. I'm talking about on-body drapes, clothes, and that especially, the first part of that is to actually make it look real, right? Which is, can I swap your T-shirt, change its color, change it to a hoodie, change it to a jacket, by making it look fairly real? The answer is, as of today, yes, right? Like you can have a single image and almost like it's the same concepts of deepfakes, but you're using it on this where you're able to quickly swap it and you're able to have something that looks fairly convincing on how it can look on top of you. The second step from there is to make that real time, right? Which is when I move around, can I make this draped shirt on me also move around seamlessly as a part of this process? The answer is no, right? As of today, we don't have the computational bandwidth or the AI smarts in order to make real time on body clothing work seamlessly. Unless you're in front of a LiDAR camera, like a magic mirror, right? Where there's a camera scanning you from all sides, making that happen. On your smartphone, as of today, that's tough to do. So you either have to be in a geographical or a physical constraint, like a massive mirror like the one I have, or you just wait on a static image to swap and see how it looks. So this would be the first problem to solve, which is how do I make your smartphone make it seem realistic for you to wear some clothes and then move around and it still sticks on you and looks cool. We're starting to get there where you now can do real time good motion capture where if I move around I can sort of have a virtual skeleton moving around the same way, sort of capture a lot of those data points a lot better these days, but not quite ready just yet. The third part is really where we start looking at fit, or how well or how not well it fits yet. Am I a size M, an L, or an XL? I think from at least how much we have seen or worked with companies in the fashion space right now, the first part remains the critical question to answer. I want to know whether that dress looks good on me first, right? I can figure the size out, and I'm okay to take a gamble on the size by hitting the buy now button before I know that I look good when wearing that dress. So if you see the progression of technology here, you can't estimate size accurately right now. So I wouldn't think that's a problem easy enough to solve for just yet. But what you can do is estimate for visualization. Does it look good on me? Does it fit me? Is probably the question after that, which I think will be answered over the next few months because CV is just getting better and better. But we need to find few ways in order to crack the most basic questions of if I'm wearing loose fitting clothes, how does the system even understand that, right? In order to make that differentiating judgment in itself. Those are yet to be answered, but hopefully we get there.
Awesome. So let's choose this for the question. Interesting because Hari Harasudan from ThoughtWorks asked, "What do you think about the impact of AR/VR on the supply chain industries? Given the current COVID situation, logistics and supply chain are taking a huge impact. So, how do you think will this industry adapt or will go forward from here?"
Interesting here. I don't purport to be an expert in that space, and hence I keep it brief. Some of the interesting use cases which I have seen being deployed out right now happen to be inside, say, warehouses, right? Like as of today, how do I know that two people need to maintain 6 feet with each other? So Amazon yesterday, interestingly, launched out these monitoring services where the existing cameras are now with CV/AR tech, where they draw this circle around you and show it inside this big display next to it. So if you're getting way too close for comfort with someone else, it's going to flag you immediately, right? So you start finding these slightly interesting ways of taking the same use cases, but fitting it into where it might make sense for preventive measures like the one I mentioned. But more interestingly, if I look at wearable-based Google Glass or like similar style use cases in the supply chain piece, you now start finding that information access becomes a lot easier. If say I am to operate a specific procedure to access some part of picking up something from the warehouse, how do I know what file to go to, what section do I need to go to, and how do I navigate that piece in itself? This makes it contextually very easy for me to take a look at that kind of data. On the other side, with respect to identifying products, their shelf life, as well as whether they are good to go or not good to go, I think computer vision has a tremendous amount to offer there. Shelf life of specific products that exist. Can this make it to the customer in time? Is this something that is good enough for me to ship out as top tier product, not so top tier product? But the reason why that remains interesting, but not specifically an AR or a VR problem to solve, is because it lies on a technology which is even more foundational, which is CV. Right? So you would find that very quickly the lines between VR, AR, 3D, CV, SLAM, it all starts to get a little blurry when you're in that kind of a space. So what I think it's horses for courses, which is if the supply chain has very specific problems to solve. Is CV a solve? Is AR a solve? Is wearable technology a solve? Is more a use case on use case piece that one might want to pick up.
Right. Great. I think, sir, we are left with five more questions, which what I'll do is these questions are from again RJ from AlphaTech, Subramanya from Vibram, Suresh from Vibram again, and Harish from Bond Digital, Arun from ViewClip. So five questions. I can promise you one thing, that these questions will be shot to Sai directly over an email, and we will definitely shoot out the answers to you once he has answered them. Right. So thanks, Sai. Thanks for joining us today. Great insights. I literally didn't apprehend that this will go for a long 1.5 hours. We have had some super questions from the audience. I hope they kind of learned about the airware space a lot more. Which definitely I did. And you folks who are online, two things, two requests. You should definitely check out Scapic. Just visit the website, try getting a hang of what AR and the VR space is. And if you have any feedback, suggestions, Sai is always there for you. I mean, on Twitter, you emails, you can reach out to him. Right. So thank you, Sai. Thanks for giving us.
I don't think we should keep people waiting on dinner even
Yes,
longer.
yes. So anyway, I mean, if in case there are some noble souls, I'll be waiting in the social now. We can have a general chit chat if in case it's required. Thank you, folks. Thank you for joining. Goodbye. See you. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.